Allahumma salli ala. Yeah, read Quran. Nice Quranic surah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم عبس وتولى أن جاءه الأعمى وما يدريك لعله يزكى أو يذكر فتنفعه الذكرى أما من استغنى فأنت له تصدى وما عليك ألا يزكى وأما من جاءك يسعى وهو يخشى فأنت عنه تلهى كلا إنها تذكرة فمن شاء ذكره في صحف مكرمة مرفوعة مطهرة بأيدي سفرة كرام بررة قتل الإنسان ما أكفر من أي شيء خلقه من لطفة خلقه فقدر ثم السبيل يسره ثم أماته فأقبره ثم إذا شاء أنشره كلا لما يقضي ما أمره فلينظر الإنسان إلى طعامه أنا صببنا الماء صبا ثم شققنا الأرض شقا فأنبتنا فيها حبا وعنابا وقضبا وزيتونا ونخلا وحدائق غلبا وفاكهة وأبا متاعا لكم ولأنعامكم فإذا جاءت الصاخة يوم يفر المرء من أخيه وأمه وأبيه وصاحبته وبنيه لكل امرئ منهم يومئذ شأن يغنيه وجوه يومئذ مسفرة ضاحكة مستبشرة ووجوه يومئذ عليها غبرة ترهقها قترة أولئك هم الكفرة الفجرة صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل بكونها إن شانك هو الأبتر
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أعطيناك الكوثر وسر بك وانهر إن شانك هو الأبتر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك وعلى عباده لله الله فيها ليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرزك تنهى وزرقته فيها زميرا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم.
Anybody else would like to recite, please? Come forward. Come on. Bismillah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala.
Can I just do one? Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Inna adayna kal kausar fasli li rabbika wanhar inna shanaka huwal abtar.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين إن الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
You want to do it? Let's do the last one and then we'll call the Sheikh in.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Inna atainaka al-kawthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar inna shanaka huwal abtar.
Good job, beta. Salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers. We have a great scholar with us. So please, every day, inshallah, we'll try to have lecture started at 8 o'clock. So please be in before that so we can gain the maximum knowledge out of it. Please recite loud salawat for Jaffer Ladak. Allah.
اللهم صل على محمد. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Before we begin, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the community for extending a warm invite to be able to commemorate the martyrdom anniversary of our fourth holy Imam As-Sajjad Salawatullah wa Salamuhu alayhi. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make our discussions fruitful, blessed and successful, and that we both learn from each other insha'Allah throughout this series. I have a particular way of how I like to conduct the majalis. So it may be that some of you have seen on YouTube, I always ask everyone to bring a Quran with them to the majlis. So especially to my young brothers and sisters, from tomorrow night, please do bring a Quran with you. In the meantime, everyone who has a phone, please take out the phone. Everyone, even the adults, don't worry, I won't bite. I won't tell you off. And all of you, I want you to search the following ayat. Hands up, how many of you have an app, a Quran app on your phone. So use the Quran app. If you don't have the app, then everybody search it in Google. So everybody turn to chapter number 9, Surah At-Tawbah of the Holy Quran. We will need verses 46 and 47. That's Surah At-Tawbah, chapter number 9, verses 46 and 47. And then afterwards, we will need the same surah, chapter number 9, Surah At-Tawbah, verses 111 to 112. So please have these verses open with you, and we will be studying them tonight, inshaAllah. There is much benefit of reading the Quran and becoming more aware of the verses. Number one, many of us will be reading these verses for the first time, and we will realize that the Quran has so much depth and profundity to it. And you will come to know about where these verses are. Second, it is easier for us to digest the verses when we're actually reading them. If you're just listening to me, there is benefit. But if you're reading the verses for yourself, there is greater benefit. Thirdly, in terms of majlis, the human mind can only concentrate for about 20 minutes if it's just listening. Whereas when we include different forms of education, we increase our level of concentration, which includes being able to look at something, being able to note something down. This is called kinesthetic learning. It increases the level of concentration. And fourthly, the hadith comes from our sixth holy Imam, Jaffer Ladak, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh. He says, whoever reads the Quran from its pages and not from memory, even if you know the verses, but you read them from the pages itself. تُخَفِّفُ الْعَذَابَ عَنِ الْوَالِدَيْنِ وَلَوْ كَانَ كَافِرَيْنِ. Allah will lighten the punishment of a person's parents, even if the parents are kafir. This is the reward of reading the Quran directly from the pages. So inshallah, at the beginning of each of our majalis, we will mention the verses and ask you to have those open and ready for our discussion that night, inshallah. For the love of our fourth holy Imam, Ali ibn al-Husayn Zainul Abidin, one loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وقوله الحق: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لو خرجوا فيكم ما زادوكم إلا خبالا ولا أوضعوا خلالكم يبغونكم الفتنة وفيكم سماعون لهم والله عليم بالظالمين. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. عظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا أبي عبد الله الحسين صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. Our series over these coming 5 nights, inshallah, is to commemorate the martyrdom anniversary of our beloved 4th Holy Imam, Ali ibn al-Hussein Zainul Abidin, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh. Our 4th Imam was charged with the duty and responsibility of reviving an Islam and a Muslim ummah that had all but become dead after the martyrdom of his father, Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. We often mention that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam saved Islam from a type of destruction that was overcoming the Muslim ummah. To martyr the grandson of your own prophet and messenger and his family and massacre them the way in which they did, whilst acknowledging his position, as well as then taking his family members as captive and parading them with every type of torture and humiliation that one could imagine, is enough to surmise the extent of how far the Muslim ummah had fallen back into Jahiliyyah. In the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lauds and praises the community in Medina al-Munawwara at the time of the Prophet. An ayah of revelation in Surah Al-Imran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas. You are the best of people that have been heralded for mankind. This ummah was the example for the whole of mankind and was able to overcome the practices of Jahiliyyah within the span of 10 and 20 years. But you can imagine how far back into their Jahiliyyah they had returned when they were trampling upon the chest of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam with 10 horsemen and horses. Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam is tasked with reviving an ummah that has many various different flaws that have crept back into it. The age-old tribalism had reared its ugly head through the shame of Banu Umayyah and their jealousy of Banu Hashim and Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. You had once again the hatred of women and children, just the way in which they used to bury their daughters alive prior to Islam coming, crept back in the way in which they attacked the women and children on the night of Sham-e Ghariban and then paraded Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. You had the issues of gambling and alcohol once again present within the ummah as if it wasn't a problem by virtue of Yazid ibn Muawiyah drinking and enjoying himself whilst the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is on a plate next to him, and many, many, many more. The question I pose as part of the series is this: how does Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam revive such an ummah that is scared of Banu Umayyah, that is plagued with the behaviors of fleeing from the Imams, from Amir al-Mu'mineen, fleeing from helping Imam al-Hasan and al-Hussein salamullahi alayhim ajma'een? How do you revive an ummah that is so afraid of its own shadow because it knows at every turn you will have Banu Umayyah spies sitting next to you, that you will fall under the same sword of Yazid as what Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam did, or Hazrat Muslim ibn Aqil alayhi salam did? How do you revive such an ummah? It would be reductive of us to simply state that Imam alayhi salam wept and let people know of Karbala. It would be reductive of us and fall short of understanding the Imam's methodology by just stating that he would recite dua and gave to us Sahifa as-Sajjadiyya, or he spoke about the rights of people and had Risalat al-Huquq. there is so much more that takes place in the imamate of Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam. Our series is to unlock those treasures and try to appreciate the political movement of Imam, the spiritual movement of the Imam, the tactical movement of the Imam, and the various different ways in which he re-enlivened a community. Our introduction tonight is to do the following. There is a very interesting hadith by the 6th Imam alayhi salam in which he describes the Shia at the time of the 4th Imam as Shia who didn't even know their halal and their haram. So just think about that very carefully. 6th Imam is ma'soom. When he speaks with perfection and clarity. There's a hadith which we'll talk about in a minute, where Imam says that the Shia during the time of Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam didn't even know their halal or their haram. This is how far the Shia had fallen. Tonight we're going to explore that hadith and use it as the starting point of our entire series. And we'll also mention one or two other ayat and ahadith, inshaAllah, that demonstrate the situation of the Muslim Ummah, and in particular the way the Shia were. You will find that they were not willing to help Imam Ma'soom. And when they were with Imam, the majority of them, many of them, they blamed Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam for not uprising against Yazid again after the 10th of Muharram. This was the level of thinking of the Shia. In order for us to be able to see where Imam takes his Shia, we need to start with the point of where they were at the point of the 10th of Muharram. When we understand what was going in the minds and hearts of the Muslim community, we have framed the challenge that the Imam has in front of him. And that is something that we will do tonight. The first thing we will always do is we will always ground our discussion in the Holy Quran and then move to the ahadith, number one. Number two, it will be an interactive discussion, so at certain points I will ask a question and I'll hope that you answer back and engage in the discussion. So I might point to you and say, what's your view on this ayah? What's your view on this hadith? And inshallah you will respond back as best as you can. And thirdly, especially for my young brothers here in the front and in the middle, as well as my uncles and my grandparents who are sitting all around towards the back, I will always leave you with homework. Is it the summer holidays? Is everyone on break? Yes? They're still on holidays. So they have all the time to be able to do the homework. Someone will say, oh, but they get too much homework. No, it's the holidays. You're free until when? When do they go back? In September? Next week. I'll be finished by next week. You've got all the time to finish the homework. You going to school tomorrow? Excellent. It's a good way to start your new year with homework. So I will always leave with homework, inshaAllah. And the idea is to give you something to reflect on in preparation for tomorrow night's discussion. If you can help me to revive the name and the love of our 4th Imam with a very loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Please open your Qur'ans to chapter number 9 of the Holy Quran, Surah At-Tawbah, verse number 47. This ayah of the Holy Quran grounds us in our discussion tonight. At the time of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was a similar challenge whereby many of the Muslim Ummah were unwilling to support the Prophet. And in fact, when they supported the Prophet, they actually caused more harm than good. This is very important to understand, that when it comes to our discussion about the revival of the Ummah and particularly the Shia of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and the challenges that they were undergoing between the times of Imam al-Hussein and Imam al-Sajjad alayhim salam, that even prior to them, the Quran gives us the principle, the example, that many of the Muslims imagined that they were doing good work, but actually they would cause more harm to the movement of the Prophet than good. Why is this important? I need to reflect. We all need to reflect. My works have to be in line with the objectives of Islam, the objectives of the Imam of the time. It could be that, God forbid, I think I am doing something that is positive, but actually it's something that the Quran or the Imam does not want from me in this moment. I need to have ma'rifah and insight of the works that I am doing. The Quran provides us with this framework that at that time there were Muslims who, even though they would support the Prophet, they actually caused more harm than good. In Surah At-Tawbah, verses 46 and 47, we read that particular issue. Read ayah 46 with me. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وَلَوْ أَرَادُوا الْخُرُوجَ لَأَعَدُّ لَهُ عُدَّةً وَلَكِنْ كَرِهَ اللَّهُ إِنْبِعَاثَهُمْ فَثَبَّتَهُمْ. And if they had intended to go forth, the ayah is referring to some of the companions who didn't want to go forward to the battlefield with the Prophet in the 10th year after Hijrah to be able to face the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire were making incursions into the Muslim Ummah via Syria, modern day Syria. This was incursions into the Muslim community. The Prophet was trying to push them back. Why? The Roman Empire was the greatest, the largest empire in the world. If the Muslim community could show bravery and courage and force against the Roman Empire in the life of the Prophet, then they would be willing to do so after the death of the Prophet. But if they showed fear and hesitation during the life of the Prophet, then they definitely weren't going to support that campaign after the Prophet. So this part of the sequence of Surah At-Tawbah is pushing this issue, that the Muslims should push back against the incursions of the Roman Empire. Read the ayah again, verse 46. And if they intended to go forth, they would have provided some equipment. The meaning of this is that, yeah, maybe some of the companions would have provided the equipment, but because they did not want to support the Prophet in the first place, the type of equipment that they would have supported Islam with would have been useless and shoddy equipment. If they didn't want to be there in the first place, why would they bring the best of their equipment? You see what I mean? So they would have purposefully brought equipment that would have failed the needs of the time. And if they had intended to go forth, they would certainly have provided equipment. But Allah did not like that they went forth to the battlefield. Subhanallah, normally you would imagine Allah would love that people from the Ummah support the Prophet, go to the battlefield. Allah says He doesn't even like that these people are there. Worse still, what does the ayah say? فَثَبَّتَهُمْ. Allah held them back. Can you imagine? Allah Jalla Jalaluhu says that there were some Muslims at the time of the Prophet that Allah had to stop them from coming to the battlefield. This is how bad they were going to be for the Muslim Ummah if they were present. It's not just Shia at the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen that left him, Imam al-Hasan that left him, left Imam al-Hussein, used to abuse Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam. The Quran shows us that there are some Muslims who act actually unfavorably towards Islam. Allah Himself has to intervene to hold them back. God forbid I am one of those, or we are one of those. Verse 47. لَوْ خَرَجُوا فِيكُمْ. Had they actually gone forth with you, Ya Rasulullah, مَا زَادُوكُمْ إِلَّا خَبَالًا. They would have not added anything to your army, to your movement, but corruption. Subhanallah. Why do you think that's the case? Why do you think they would have added nothing but corruption? What does this mean? Adnan, because I know you, I'm picking on you first, huh? Once I get to know everybody else's name tonight, you're all done for. Yeah? Why did they only add corruption when they went to the battlefield? Their intention was bad. Ahsant, what else? Oh, all this excuse. Yeah, I said what he said. I was going to say what he was going to say. No, I like it. Ahsant, you're both very right. But in addition to the intention problem, they would go to the battlefield and they would cause whispers and doubts amongst the fellow brothers. They would say things like, I don't think we're going to win this war. They would say things like, do you think we should go back to Medina? Maybe Medina will be attacked. Maybe we should go back there and defend it. They would cause doubts inside the army on the battlefront, and as a result, there was weakness that used to creep into the Muslim army. The ayah continues, had they gone forth with you, they would have added nothing but corruption, and they would have certainly hurried about amongst you, seeking to sow dissension amongst the Muslims. Allahu Akbar. The Quran provides us with a precedent that there are people in the Muslim Ummah that don't understand their duties, that actually cause more harm than good, and that Allah Himself has to withhold them lest they cause more problems for the Muslim community. Here, let us turn to hadith of our sixth holy Imam, Jaffer ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. Imam alayhi salam provides us with a hadith, which, by the way, is a sahih hadith. The chain of narration, according to our ulama, is sahih sanadan, meaning we can be certain that this is what Imam alayhi salam said. The sixth Imam says that the Shia at the time of Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam didn't even know their halal and their haram. Imagine how bad a situation it was that the people around the Imam had this level of lack of knowledge. That the Imam had to be able to revive this type of community forward. Let's read the hadith, and I want you to appreciate how the Imam alayhi salam frames the situation. Hadith is from the sixth Imam, and he talks about the fifth Imam and prior to the fifth Imam's time. The hadith is as follows. وَكَانَتِ الشِّيعَةُ قَبْلَ أَن يَكُونَ أَبُو جَعْفَرٍ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ. The Shia before Abu Ja'far. So who can tell me who is Abu Ja'far? Who is the father of Ja'far? Say again? Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. So look, listen to the hadith, it's very important. وَكَانَتِ الشِّيعَةُ قَبْلَ, before. The situation of the Shia before Abu Ja'far. Before whom? Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. What was the situation before Imam al-Baqir? So which Imam was the Imam before Imam al-Baqir? Ahsan. So this is the time of Imam as-Sajjad. What was their situation? Hum لا يعرفون مناسك حجهم وحلالهم وحرامهم. The situation of the Shia before Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, meaning during the period of Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam, hum, the Shia, لا يعرفون مناسك حجهم وحلالهم وحرامهم. The Shia didn't even know their Hajj, and they didn't know their halal and their haram. Isn't that incredible? Question number one. If I asked you, what is your halal and haram? You'll be able to tell me, right? Yes? My young brother with the water bottle in front of you. Give me something that is halal. Can't think of one? Yes, go for it. Helping somebody. What's haram? Give me an example of haram, my young brother here. Say again? Fighting people. Our youngest brothers at the front, they know they're halal and haram, mashallah. Imam alayhi salam says the Shia at that time didn't even know they're halal and they're haram. Number one. Number two, does the Imam mean literally that they didn't know halal and haram? Well, that's what the hadith says. If he wants to use a different word, then he should have used a different word. He says that the Shia didn't know their Hajj, they didn't know their haram and their halal, but it means that they didn't know their basics. It means that much of the basics of their faith had escaped them. Question 3. Why would the Shia during the time of the fourth Imam alayhi salam not even know their basics? What do you think? My brother who's got the red, yes you, yeah, glasses and got the red t-shirt on. Why would the Shia be without even the basics of their duty? Say again? Ahsant, maybe they didn't have interest. Well, there were so many revolutions the Shia were fighting against Banu Umayyah. So there's definitely interest, right? What else? Any other reason? Brother who's scratching his beard very thoughtfully. I like that. He's like, I have a view on this. I have an opinion. What do you think? They were confused. What do you mean by they were confused? That's a very beautiful insight. They didn't know whom was in the right and whom was in the... Let's think about it. When they were calling for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam around the whole ummah and sending him letters and letters, did they know who was in the right and who's in the wrong? When Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam gave his sermons and Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam gave their sermons and they all forced Yazid to allow the Sabaya, the captives, to return to Medina, did they know who was in the right or who was in the wrong? What do you think? Did they know? So even though they knew right and wrong, there was something impeding them from acting on right versus wrong. Very good answer, mashallah. Let me ask you a follow-up question if you don't mind. You don't mind me picking on you? No, that's fine. Sure? Yeah. Okay. What's your good name, brother? MashaAllah, Ali Akbar, Ahsantum, brother of Imam al-Sajjad alayhi. Where was Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam after Karbala? In Medina, good. And where in Medina was he? Back then there was no Saudi Arabia, right? But I like where you're going with it. Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam was under house arrest. When he was in Kufa, he was not free particularly, was he? No. When he was in Sham, he used every moment as an opportunity of tabligh and da'wah, correct? But he was under arrest in the dungeons of Yazid. In Medina al-Munawwara, for a lot of his life, Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam was under house arrest. He wasn't as free to be able to spread the movement of Imam as openly, say, as Imam al-Baqir later, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi wassalam later. And much of that constriction, the spies around him, the constriction of being at home, him having to frame things in a way in which was, I'm crying for my father in order to recite the gham of what occurred in Karbala. That lack of access to Imam is a major cause for why the Shia over a period of 10 and 20 years lost so much of what they had had with them. When you don't have access to proper deen or faith, people go astray. And they forget, and they don't practice, and they don't know what's right and what's wrong. For this reason, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam is giving us this ishara and saying at that time the access to Imam was less, and as a result the Shia didn't know their basics. So as you heard earlier on correctly, there was problems about making the Shia afraid of their own faith, afraid of the government of the time, and also forcing Imam alayhi salam into house arrest. Look at the hadith and how it continues. وَكَانَتِ الشِّيعَةُ قَبْلَ أَن يَكُونَ أَبُو جَعْفَرٍ. The situation of the Shia before Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. هُمْ لَا يَعْرِفُونَ مَنَاسِكَ حَجِّهِمْ وَحَلَالَهُمْ وَحَرَامَهُمْ. They didn't even know their halal and their haram. حَتَّى كَانَ أَبُو جَعْفَرٍ فَتَلَهُمْ وَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ مَنَاسِكَ حَجِّهِمْ وَحَلَالَهُمْ وَحَرَامَهُمْ. Until Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam had the opportunity to open up the doors of teaching and opened up for them the knowledges so that they learnt in the manasik of their hajj and their halal and their haram. حتى صار الناس يحتاجون إليهم من بعد ما كانوا يحتاجون إلى الناس. Between the period of the 4th and the 5th Imams, the situation of the Shia was not only that they learnt their halal and their haram, but that the Shia became so knowledgeable that the rest of the Ummah had to follow the knowledge of the Shia the same way previously the Shia were reliant on the knowledge of the people. This is how much the movement of Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam took off. During the period early with Imam al-Sajjad, the Shia didn't even know their halal and their haram. By the end of the life of Imam al-Sajjad and the movement of Imam al-Baqir alayhim as-salam, the Shia became so much knowledgeable, so powerful in their movement, that the rest of the Ummah relied on the knowledge of the Shia the same way as before the Shia were reliant on the knowledge of others. Imagine the movement of your 4th Imam, Zainul Abidin, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. To take the knowledge of the Shia from here to here, from having not known their halal and their haram, to having the whole ummah being reliant on the knowledge of the Shia, is a complete 180 degrees. It is a movement that we should be aware of and trying to understand. And inshallah, this is exactly what our series is going to try to focus on. What I want to do for the rest of the majlis, inshallah, is to give you a couple of glimpses as to the challenges that were prevalent amongst the Shia. The way they thought, the way they acted. Why did they not know their halal and their haram? Why did they not know their basics? Why is it that whenever Ibn Ziyad or Yazid or any of the tyrannical figures would actually say, if you support Imam al-Hussein, we are going to, and that would affect them and stop them, and worse still, force them onto the battlefield against Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, I want to show you a couple of narrations that frames the situation, that helps us to be able to appreciate this situation better. There's a companion by the name of Ubaidullah ibn Hur al-Ju'fi. No relationship to al-Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi. Okay, al-Hur is a popular name back then. Who is the companion? What's his name? Ubaidullah ibn al-Hur. Ahsant. Just checking that everyone's still with us. The companion's name is by Ubaidullah ibn al-Hur. He was a companion of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Some say that he left Imam and went to Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan on his side. Others say he continued with the Imam. Anyway, the narration I'll mention to you now is that Ubaidullah ibn Hur, he was one of those that when Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam began to come to Kufa, Ubaidullah ibn Hur actually left Kufa in order to avoid Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Just think about that. Imagine Imam al-Hussein was coming here to Atlanta. Imagine you had all written to him. Imagine you had pledged allegiance to him. So Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is arriving at the airport. And you hear Imam is coming here. And then God forbid some of you leave in order to avoid Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. That is what this person did. Ubaidullah ibn Hur. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam happens to come across him whilst Ubaidullah is trying to avoid Imam. Listen to the hadith and see again the level of the companions, the level of the thinking of the ummah at that time, and really try to grasp what Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam would have had to have dealt with. What types of hearts and minds does he have to awaken and reinvigorate in his period of his imamate? I'll read to you the hadith. When Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam moved towards Kufa, Ubaidullah left Kufa so as not to encounter Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. However, near Karbala, he encountered Imam alayhi salam. When Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam arrived in an area known as Qasr Bani Muqatil, he saw a tent. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam saw a tent a few kilometers outside of Karbala. And so he asked someone, to whom does this tent belong to? They replied, this belongs to Ubaidullah ibn Hur al-Ju'fi. Imam alayhi salam sent someone to invite him to the camp of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Listen to what Ubaidullah ibn Hur responded with. He says, I did not leave Kufa except that I was afraid that al-Hussein was to go there to Kufa and I would not help Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. So I left Kufa. I didn't want to be in Kufa when Imam says, give me your sword, give me your heart and mind, pledge allegiance, and I would say no to him. So I've left Kufa in order to avoid this. Person came back and told Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam what Ubaidullah had said. What do you think happens next? Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam goes to the tent of Ubaidullah ibn Hur. He says the following, O Ubaidullah, you have made many mistakes in the past, and Allah will hold you to account for your actions. Which mistakes? He had left Amir al-Mu'mineen and gone on the side of Muawiyah, according to some. And when Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam had come to Kufa, he had avoided the Imam and left Kufa. Allah will ask you about the things that you have done. Don't you want to return to Allah in these hours by helping me, so that my grandfather, the Prophet, may intercede for you on the day of judgment? Ubaidullah responded, Yabna Rasulillah, O son of the Prophet, if I come to help you, I will be killed at the beginning of the battle, and I do not consent to die before you. Can you imagine? This man knows that he is going to die, but doesn't want to have to give his life in the way of Imam alayhi salam. So he openly says it. He openly says to the Imam, I don't want to help you, because I know that if I do, It'll be the end of my life, and I'm not ready to give my life for you. And then he continues, I do not consent to die, but instead take this horse of mine. Subhanallah. I don't want to give you my body, take my horse's body instead. I don't want to give you my life, take the horse's life instead. I don't want to give you my time, my effort, my life, my soul, take my horse instead. Think about that very carefully, what this man is willing to trade in the service of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. I do not consent to die before you. Instead, take this horse of mine. I swear by Allah, no one has ever ridden it and tried to reach their goal except that this horse has been fast enough to be able to reach it. And no one has ever chased me on this horse but that I outran them and surpassed them. Never, never have I been caught. So look, the man is saying, I don't want to help you directly, but take this instead. It's going to be useful to you, Yabna Rasulullah. You're going to be in battle. What better for you than a fast horse? Listen to how Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam responds to this man. Imam turned his face away from Ubaidullah ibn Hur and said to him, I do not need you, nor do I need your horse. Imagine. Look at the crux of the narration here. Look at the way in which the Shia at that time, or indeed the Muslims at that time, were with their Imam Ma'soom. They wanted to give support, but the absolute minimal support that they had to give. They would try to call the Imam and then avoid him and let Imam do all the work rather than them participating in the work. They would be willing to give him something that was easy for them to part with, but they weren't willing to be able to give something that was difficult for them to part with. In every way, they were willing to let Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam down. Worse, when they began to offer something to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, like this Ubaidullah ibn Hur, he wants to be able to give a horse in the way of the Imam. Imam rejects it and says, I don't need your horse. This is not what I want from you. It's like me saying this to you. Imam wants 100%. You're willing to give 5%. He says, I don't need your horse. I don't need you if this is how you're going to be. I want you to be able to give what I need you to give, not what you want to give to me. Can you see the difference? There's a huge gap. From one perspective in this hadith, we learn that there were Muslims and Shia like this at that time. From another perspective, we imagine how difficult it must have been for Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam to have to revive such people, bring an ummah back. What did the previous hadith say? Imam al-Sajjad, Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam took Shia who didn't even know their halal and their haram to such a level where the rest of the ummah was reliant upon the knowledge of the Shia of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. How do you take Shia from this circumstance to that circumstance within the space of a few years, and with all the sufferings and the trials that they have failed one after another? One last hadith, again, but this time for and about our fourth holy Imam Zainul Abidin salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. This hadith is narrated by the great companion Abi Hamza al-Thumali. We've all heard of this great companion, especially because the dua Abu Hamza al-Thumali. Abi Hamza narrates this hadith. He says, Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam was on his way to Hajj. And he says that a man stopped him and said to him, Ya ibn Rasulillah, you're going to Hajj, but you've left the battlefield. There are all these revolutions that are taking place. There's the Tawabin movement, there's the Mukhtar al-Thaqafi movement. You're going to Hajj, but you're leaving the greater duty of jihad? What type of Imam are you? Your grandfather was on the battlefield against Banu Umayyah. Your father was on the battlefield against Banu Umayyah. Your uncle was on the battlefield. What wrong are you doing? Why are you going to Hajj? Please open your Qur'ans to chapter number 9, Surah At-Tawbah. Which verse? Does anyone remember? Which ayah did we say we need to now study? Verse number? 111. Jazakumullah khair. At this point, that man started to recite the Quran to Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam to justify why the Imam was wrong for going to Hajj and leaving the battlefield. Look at the ayah. The man started reciting. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. إن الله اشترى من المؤمنين أنفسهم وأموالهم بأن لهم الجنة يقاتلون في سبيل الله فيقتلون ويقتلون. Indeed, Allah has bought of the believers their souls and their properties. And for this, they shall have the gardens of Jannah. What do, these mu'mineen? They fight in the way of Allah. They slay the enemy and they are slain. Ya ibn Rasulillah, Allah tells you this is what you should be doing. Why aren't you doing it? Imagine a man, a companion saying, I know more about your duty to Islam than you, O Imam as-Sajjad. What does this tell you? Look at the level of what the Shia were like at that time. They thought they could second guess Imam Ma'soom, tell Imam Ma'soom what they had to do. Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam responded and said to the man, read the next ayah for me. Read the next verse of the Quran, verse 112. Read it, inshallah, with me. The man started to recite. التابعون العابدون الحامدون السائحون الراكعون الساجدون الآمرون بالمعروف والناهون عن المنكر وَالْحَافِظُونَ لِحُدُودِ اللَّهِ. Who are these people that fight in the way of Allah, that you are praising so much? They are those who are at-ta'ibun, they do tawbah to Allah. They are al-abidun, they worship Allah. They're the ones who praise, who fast, who do ruku', who do sajda, who call towards amra bil ma'ruf wa nahi anil munkar. And then when the man came to the last sifat, وَالْحَافِظُونَ لِحُدُودِ اللَّهِ, they are those who keep the limits of Allah. Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam says, man, stop. Do you understand this part of the verse? He said, those who are hafidhuna li hududillah, they actually preserve the hudud of Allah, the boundaries of Allah. That would be listening to us, Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. If the ummah had actually done what they were supposed to do, if they had preserved the hudud of Allah, you would not have to do jihad as the Tawabin. You would not have to do jihad as the Mukhtar al-Thaqafi movement. You would actually have upheld your duties in the first place. Can you see the circumstances of the Shia at that time, their level of thinking, their level of acting, the way in which they would second guess the Imam? This is what plagued the Ummah at that time. Our series, inshallah, is try to uncover the systematic movement of Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam, such that we understand how he revived that ummah and how he managed to be able to take them from not even knowing their halal and their haram to an ummah that were entirely reliant on the ilm of the Shia of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. At that time, companions were blaming Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam and said, you don't want to go to the battlefield? Maybe they had forgotten that Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam was on the battlefield, that he tried his hardest to get to the battlefield. Whom could have done more for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam than Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam? This was the lack of insight of the Shia at that time, to blame Imam al-Sajjad. Imam alayhi salam is lying in a state of unconsciousness. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam enters into that tent, sits down beside him, and has to wake him up from his unconsciousness. Oh, my son Ali ibn al-Hussein, the time has come for your father Hussein to enter into the battlefield. Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam looks at him and says, oh, my father, how is that possible that it's your time? Tell me, where is your Habib? Imam says, Habib is no more. He says, well, tell me, where is your Aliun al-Akbar? There is no way you could go to the battlefield if Aliun al-Akbar is here. He says, Aliun al-Akbar lies in the tent next to you with his chest split open from a wound that has been dug into his chest by the spearhead of a spear. Imam al-Sajjad asks him, oh father, well tell me, where is Abbas? There is no way that you would be allowed into the battlefield whilst Abbas is still here. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam says to him, Sajjad, please don't ask me about anyone else, for there is none left from amongst the adult males except me and you. Everybody has gone. Imam al-Sajjad tries to sit up. He calls his auntie Zainab bin Kulthum and says, oh my auntie Kulthum, hand me a stick and hand me a sword. Why do you want a stick and why do you want a sword? I want a stick so I have some strength to be able to stand up, and I want a sword so I can defend the grandson of Rasulullah. How dare they say that Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam was not going to war? After the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, Sajjad was lying in that tent in a state of semi-consciousness, between illness and being awake. All of a sudden, Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam starts running towards him and says, oh Sajjad, my Imam, what is that sound that I can hear outside the tents? The narration says that Imam begins to look out of the tents towards the battlefield. And then he says, oh my auntie Zainab, that is the sound of them crushing the chest of my father Hussein under the horse's hooves. When they ran over the body of Imam al-Hussein, they crushed his body so much that it was as if they were kneading the dough. This is how soft the chest of al-Hussein alayhi salam was left. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Please raise your hands and join me in dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the appearance of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam and to allow us to be alongside him at all times in our life and in our death. We ask you, Ya Allah, help us to understand the movement of Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam, so that we may honor him and benefit from it. Wassalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Please conclude this discussion and we get ready for salah with 3 very loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.